Hey folks, Jess Martin here. I have been working over the last few months to integrate asynchronous, like background software engineering agents into my software engineering workflow, and I've had some success with it, and had a few people ask me what my process is, which this video hopefully shares a little bit of that process. This should probably be a blog post, but I can at least put it in video form for you and share a little bit about what I've learned and how I'm working with these things. So yesterday I posted this tweet, which is a slight simplification, but I think still fairly accurate. Basically, what I do is I grab my phone. I have an app called Whisper on my phone that it basically allows me to talk, and it transcribes whatever I'm saying via Whisper and then emails it to me. So I just walk out of my office. There's a door right there, and hit record and talk for 5, 10, 15 minutes. This isn't using like OpenAI voice mode or Claude voice mode, which they just added yesterday, by the way. Haven't been super impressed with the voice mode things. It's more me just getting all of my thoughts out in some form. When I get back, I have that transcription. I take that transcription and I hand it to Gemini or Opus. It doesn't really matter what model you're using as long as it is like a frontier reasoning model. So O3, Gemini Pro, Opus, whatever. I used to be a big Gemini Pro fan with the 0325 snapshot, but the more recent snapshots I don't like as much. I've just started using Opus for this. I've used O3 a little bit, but generally it's Gemini. And then I have Gemini. I give it a little bit more context for the code base itself, so I can actually pull up I'll put this over here and pull up an example of doing this yesterday. Let's see, work squared. Um, I'll give the transcription to Gemini and give it a little bit more context and about what I want to build. On this particular project called Work Squared, I've been building using AI from the very beginning, and so I actually have a fair amount of documentation that I have co-written with the AI about the project, and so there's a lot of information that it can glean just from me handing it other documentation on the project. But then it writes a markdown file. This is super important. It writes a markdown file with a sort of plan or approach, that kind of stuff. I've experimented with giving it different headings, but at this point I just ask it to write one and I let it kind of create the headings. Um, Now, the reason it's important that this is a markdown file and not just like something in chat is we need an external artifact that we can both save and like iterate on, but also something that I can directly manipulate, because sometimes it's faster for me to actually go and change sections myself rather than in chat asking the LLM to change it for me. So work squared production plan. And by the way, like I'll include this link as well in the list, but I actually wrote, this is similar to the first few steps in my pairing with LLMs approach. So I have, talk about the initial feature discussion, design document creation, and then to-do list generation. So we're going to do this basically this same set of steps here, which is why I'm kind of starting with this already done. I'll do another video recording where I actually do this for a real feature, but for right now, um, the next step that is really interesting to do is actually ask Gemini or ask the model to ask clarifying questions. Sometimes it will put it in the document itself, but basically you want the model to basically poke holes in the plan about areas where it's unsure. And so, models are taught to make decisions and be convincing, and so they'll often come up with stuff, but they have relatively low certainty or clarity on whether that particular feature. So we go back and forth and address the clarifying questions. It's usually multiple rounds. I have an app called Super Whisper on my Mac, which isn't even running. There you go. It is. Anyway, yeah, I have Super Whisper on my Mac, and I'll use that to basically transcribe as I'm talking. So I can just basically hit a button and it will transcribe me. That might have muted me just now. I'm not sure. But anyway, then I can like paste that in. So I'll even use voice a little bit to go back and forth as we're refining this document. And then The next step, like once it's got the basic understanding of the feature, I'll have it actually break down the feature into phases of like, show me a phased approach. And this is super important because sometimes, most often what I found is that AI takes um, a depth first approach to building software as opposed to a breadth first approach to building software. Like this is very like this concept's explored in like extreme programming explained like from 25, 30 years ago, but you basically want at each stage you want to have working software. And so um, make sure that you get AI to turn to like pivot the implementation so that every phase it's building something that's working. And the really important thing about this is that AI needs the feedback loop just like a human in order to know whether it's built the right thing. And the feedback loop consists of unit tests and integration tests, linting, type checking, um, PR reviews, and then feedback from, and then QA on the actual feature. You need that whole loop to know like that we're not just going to like go off into oblivion if and that is unless you're like vibe coding or whatever the heck that is, where you're just like spitting out some stuff. If you're writing production software, you're going to need those feedback loops. All right, so this is a doc. This is actually a phased doc that I'm going to start working on today. So I'll walk through my next steps. Um, I'll call one more thing out about this particular PR. You can see that it generated. This is just a documentation PR. And you could see that it generated a bunch of documentation. Well, not it didn't generate all of this for this documentation. So a couple things. These 000, 001, 002, and 003 are previous features that I've built in this repository. There's like quite a bit of code already in this repo, and I'll show a quick demo of it in a second. But the so these three features were already done. I just had it reorganize the directory structure. So I'm just trying to play around with how can I track like done work outside of sort of linear GitHub issues, that kind of thing. Have it in the repository that makes it just that much faster for it to grab work. So the next feature we're going to work on is called projects and workers. That's what I was just showing you an example of, this phased implementation. Right now we have a project plan that's divided into phases, but we don't yet have a detailed to-do list. So we're going to get down into that in just a second. One thing I did, yeah, just a couple. Oh, that's right. I was going to mention this. For this particular project plan, we had an architectural decision that was pretty important. We needed to add a Node.js backend. So far, this project has been a React SPA that hits a Cloudflare worker, and that has been the entire piece. Syncs with LiveStore. We can talk about LiveStore and that kind of stuff later in detail, but it's been a pretty simple front end only architecture for a variety of reasons that it like lays out here why we need it. Your requirements demand a traditional backend. Why? Persistent workers time out after 30 seconds or 30 minutes if you're on Cloudflare Pro. For document processing, worker orchestration, future proofing, we're going to need a Node.js backend. And so I actually had it write what's called an ADR. It's an architectural decision record. It's a format that I've used in the past at several different jobs, piloted or like invented by Mike Nygaard. These ADRs walk through a proposed change to the architecture. What is in this ADR and the format of it is not important. The important thing is that like at each important decision point, the LLM is engaged in that process, and I'm engaged with the LLM. So we actually went back and forth on like, where would we host this Node.js worker? Should it be Node.js? Should it be another language? What are our like we dug into the LiveStore documentation around LiveStore node adapter to make sure that it was sufficient. We found that there was like an alternative. In fact, it might have even it didn't include the references. I should have had to do that. Like references to the different documentation sources that we use to come up with this decision. So anyway, kind of interesting, tracking. This is something that really high, like professional software engineering teams do well, is they document in their architectural decisions. Helps with people onboarding, helps with new developers onboarding, helps the LLM to make sense of the architecture, why it is the way it is. But now it's so much easier to do this now with an LLM writing a lot of the documentation and you acting as the editor. Okay, so we're at take transcription, hand it to Gemini or Opus, have it ask me and clarifying questions, answer questions by talking out loud. It writes a plan doc. Now we're at the phased to-do list piece. All right, let's get to that. So this I use Claude to actually come up with the phase to-do list, Claude Sonnet, I should say. You can use Gemini if you want. Gemini tends to be a more high level. Sonnet tends to be like very low level. Here's the way that I do a thing. I'm going to use Claude Code to do this work. I do have Cursor open as well. And I apologize if my face is like over the terminal window. All right. I'm gonna call Claude YOLO, which is a little command that I wrote, an alias that I wrote for Claude dangerously skip permissions. I don't really recommend using dangerously skip permissions outside of a container yet, because this can literally like do anything on your computer, including like rm-rf slash and other super destructive things without asking for permission. But I'm reasonably comfortable with Claude YOLO on documentation writing, and I am working on some of my other projects. I already have containers set up, and I'm working inside containers with Claude Code so that the damage is fairly limited of what it can possibly do, other than like exfiltrate my code. But anyway, let's run Claude YOLO. Create a branch, and we're going to work on work squared production plan. The first step is to create a detailed to-do list for each of the phases. Let's start with just phase one. All right, if you see phase one over here, phase one is about creating a unified project system with documents and tasks. So right now we have I'll show you a real quick demo of what this does. npm install. Let's see, localhost 6001. All right, so the app is basically like an AI-enabled workspace that combines chat or agents working in the workspace with Kanban documents and then like MCP tools and other sort of organizational. It's intended to be like an AI-enabled operating system for small and medium businesses. Still figuring out the go-to-market and the feature set here, but you have boards. We have AI chats over here. Um, what are the boards I have access to? And it can list out. And so it has a board tool. Um, yeah. It knows which one I'm currently listening to. I can create new cards that has like card tools and other things like that. So I'm restructuring this whole feature is about restructuring that. But we're starting with a couple things. Um, the goal of phase one is create a projects page or list and create new project modal. And then you can view the project as a Kanban board, which integrates existing Kanban, and you can edit the project metadata. These are way too high level to act on for and the AI will make mistakes here. So we need to break these into more detailed to-dos. So let's go ahead and ask Claude to do that. Let's rewrite the project management and task management features in 1.1. Let me see what 1.2 has. Yeah, 1.2 has the entire document editor. We'll do 1.2 in a second. Let's just do 1.1 as user stories with detailed to-do lists. Create a to-do document in 004 projects and workers. And then we can review together. This is really important. Before you start writing code, please ask any clarifying questions. You can see another thing, because I've been doing this for a bit, I could say you can see examples of well-scoped user stories in like 003, 002 Kanban to do, and 003 LM chat to do. So now I can like point at examples. I want my user stories to be roughly like this. Um, all right, let's have it go. Um, yeah. There's a really interesting new feature of Claude Code that I haven't had a chance to try out yet, called plan mode. So there's like default mode, edit mode, and plan mode. Plan mode is what we're doing right now. I don't know how plan mode is specified, whether it can only plan in its context window or whether it can plan in planning documents. But something that you could experiment with, maybe you get some mileage out of that. This would definitely be the point at which I would consider going to get coffee. The phase to-do list piece can take a little bit of time sometimes. I think part of the problem right now is that it's like reading a lot of documents, things like that. Oh, here we go. Almost ready. I'm going to pull up cursor because I'm going to want to review this document um, in something other than the Claude Code interface. So docs, plans 004. Make this a little bit bigger for those who are on a smaller screen. I'm thinking that about the rest of like 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. I will ultimately want all of these broken out into user stories all the way through the end of phase one, because I'm going to try and parallelize some of this work, and some of these things can be done in parallel, and that's actually something you can ask Claude to help with. Like, how would I parallelize this work across multiple Claude Code instances? Um, just while we're okay, cool. Here we go. Key features of the plan, 8 incremental user stories. Each builds on the previous one, delivers immediate value, backwards compatibility, blah, blah, blah. Some of these principles are like written into my Claude code file, or my Claude.md file of like progressive enhancement, backward compatibility, yada, yada, yada. Uh, Global search, project statistics. All right, structure. Okay, here, question for review. Story priority. Do you want to adjust the order of any stories? I prioritize the core project concept first, then advanced features. Yeah, that's definitely going to be the case, but we'll go look. Scope concerns. Story 6 might be complex. Should we simplify it for phase one? Yeah, global search, that sounds like a really bad idea. We'll go take a look at that in a second, but like this is where things get into like the red flag. UI direction. I assume we'd evolve the existing Kanban UI rather than rebuild it. Is this the right approach? Probably. Migration strategy. The plan maintains backward compatibility. Does this align with your vision? All right, so let's go through and start answering questions. In terms of priority, let's go take a look at the way it broke things out. Um, all right, so view list of projects. That's definitely the first thing we need to do. Currently, we have view list of Kanban boards. Yeah, this replaces the current boards list with a more comprehensive project view that will eventually include documents, tasks, and workers. Um, Quick note, projects do not include docs. Well, that's not true. You can assign, okay, now thinking through, that is actually correct. All right, so, let's see. Rename board.star to project.star. Yeah, this is the right way to go about it. We already have a board object in the system, and renaming it to projects is what we need to do. We don't need to create a new object. Just you don't know this code base, but I know this code base. So like I'm not going to go into detail, and this video could get very long if I were to go through and actually do the real work. But meta point here, like because we're now at the level of these individual tasks of rename this to that, now I'm starting to see exactly how the LLM is going to try and solve this problem, right? So I can start to imagine, I can start to conceptualize the actual lines of code here. Like I'm imagining the data model that it's renaming the boards table to the projects table. Perfect. It's adding a description field. Perfect. We're going to need that because projects have a description. We talked about that earlier in the document that I worked on with Gemini yesterday. It's going to do a migration. Great. I don't want any migrations. Let me see. So I think that is 4. No migrations, please. This is not in prod yet. We will handle migrations later. Too complex. Um, so that'll update and remove all these migrations. Query with description support, UI. Yes, make the boards page into the projects page. Reroute. Yeah, all this looks good. All right, great. So project one looks fine, or story one looks fine. Story two, create a new project with the description. The event is project created. Yep, form, validation, display tests. Great, this looks good. Implementation notes, rich context, 500 characters provides enough context without overwhelming the UI. Sure, whatever. We may want to adjust that later, but that's a very easy thing to change. Story three, view project as unified workspace. Kanban plus feature documents. Yeah, that seems reasonable. Project name, breadcrumb navigation. Yes. That seems reasonable. Support orphan task without projects. Okay, yeah. As a user, I want to create and manage tasks that don't belong to any specific project so I can capture the work that doesn't fit project boundaries. Wonderful. This is coming directly out of a conversation that Gemini and I had yesterday that went into the planning document. Should tasks always belong to projects? Um, Navigation tests. Great, 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 great. Notice how we, like, through our planning process, we're very narrowly constraining what software this thing is going to build. And so you're doing this is the spec, right? This is actually the theory building step of software. You're conceptualizing the code base, you're trying to encode it in these sort of instructions down to the user story level and verifying that this is going to kind of go in the direction that we want it to go in. Ooh, drag and drop. That should definitely be a future enhancement. Move tasks between projects. Actually, move tasks between projects doesn't even seem like something we want to do right now. Okay, let's go back to, so story 5 and 6 should be, actually that's not true. We do want, let's look at how it is implementing global search. Need multiple projects with tasks. Create search tasks, add global search in the main navigation, create search results page showing tasks with project context, add filters. Holy cow, this is a huge story. I'm glad yeah, they definitely flagged this as a complex story. I would break out things like if we were going to implement global search, it should be just global search, and then filtering should be like a separate story. Possibly each type of filter is a separate story. Make these nice tiny little changes. Search results linked to task modals and parent projects. Eesh. Indexing is the thing I was thinking about in terms of performance. Yeah, and introducing SQLite FTS. Yeah, definitely. Story 6 should be phase 2 at earliest. That was like the second thing. Um, Story priority seems good. Um, Project dashboard with task statistics. Task statistics? I didn't ask for this. I want to see project statistics. This is not technically true that story 7 is dependent on story 6. Like, these dependencies are bogus. It's just saying that each story depends on the story before it, which is not entirely true. You could skip story 6 and move on. So, its planning is okay. Archiving completed projects. I didn't even ask for that. Project dashboard with task statistics. No. Um, Skip story 7 and 8. For now. Cool. If I had a few more minutes, like this video is already getting kind of long. If I had a few more minutes, I would go through and read the detailed event system updates to review that the events that are being emitted by the event sourcing system are correct. I would review the database schema, super important. Like your data model is your program. And so even the strategy pieces like schema migration, we don't need it. Query optimization, all of that kind of stuff. So at this point, I would go through and say, and here's a few things. 5, technical depth. Should I add more depth? Technical depth. is fine. I had enough, it gave me enough detail to be able to do what I needed to do. And then, yeah, in terms of UI direction, evolve rather than rebuild. Yes. Update plan, and let me review before starting work. All right, so it's gonna, it did what I wanted it to do, which is the really important thing. It created a detailed list, and in this detailed list, we like found things that were kind of going off the rails, right? Like the global search thing, adding SQLite full text search. Like this isn't even a feature we need for the like early version of the software. It's a nice to have, and I'll probably have Claude Code build it at some point, but it's definitely a later thing. Yeah, so it already updated these to defer to phase two. Love that. And yeah, we're ready to get started. So just to wrap this up, where we would end up is I would actually say, okay, great, commit this to-do list, and then get started on the first user story. Now here's an important thing. When the user story is done, implemented, commit, um, this is in the Claude code, but I'd like to remind it anyway, because I don't totally trust it to do it itself yet. Run lint all, test, pass the tests, and commit and push a PR. Cool. So now it's actually going to go and do the work. And the next thing that I will see is I'll get a notification that a PR has been pushed. And so we're going to just let Claude do its thing. It's got enough information in the Claude.md to know how to run tests. It knows to do things like write end-to-end tests in Playwright and run them. It also knows how to use Storybook to create UI component tests. And it will, let me see, does it have any documentation? Yeah, important guidelines. Here's my testing best practices, write unit tests, build component tests, do end-to-end tests. It will do all that. It will also make sure that all the things pass, and then it will push to a pull request. And when a pull request gets posted, I have Claude Code set up, I have GitHub set up to create a new staging environment for that PR that allows me to go do QA on that. And so I can go through and leave comments in the review on the pull request on things that changed. I also have another LLM. I'm trying out, I think it's called CodeBug from Cursor, that'll go through and automatically find bugs that have been introduced in the PR. So we'll do several different things of like an LLM enabled review of the PR. We'll do QA on the actual staging environment, and then I'll do a cursory look through the code. I don't read every single line of the code very detailed, but I am looking for basically code smells of like particular functions that are super long or look like really nested and that kind of stuff. Opportunities where it's made the wrong choice. So I'm basically validating that it followed the test plan. So yeah, that's kind of my current process. Once this PR is finished, I'll actually go on to the next user story, and we work in terms of like a user story, a PR per user story. Usually the cycle is like 15, 20 minutes per PR. But if we get into some complexity, some areas where Claude Code can't figure it out, I may have to drop into like pairing with LLM mode, which I've dropped that document for how I do that work in Cursor using agent mode. Okay, I know that was really long. I meant this to be short, and it turned into half an hour. I hope this is helpful to kind of give you a guide of yeah, how I'm thinking about AI engineering.